Good morning. I'm Robert White, council member at large and chair of the Committee on Housing. Today is Thursday, May 23rd, 2024, and we're meeting in room 412 of the John A. Wilson Building. The time is now 10:03 a.m., and I'm calling to order this public roundtable. There are three measures before us to discuss today: PR 25-684, the Housing Production Trust Fund Board Chapman Todd Confirmation Resolution of 2024. PR 25-717, the Board of Directors of the District of Columbia Housing Finance Agency, Carrie Cohen, now Carrie Robinson, Confirmation Resolution of 2024. And PR 25-716, the Board of Directors of the District of Columbia Housing Finance Agency, Heather Wellington, Confirmation Resolution of 2024. First, we'll begin with Mr. Chapman Todd's reappointment to the Housing Production Trust Fund Board. The Department of Housing and Community Development, or DHCD, is the agency responsible for managing the district's Housing Production Trust Fund, which is the district's main pot of money for funding affordable housing projects. A board of 9 members is responsible for advising the mayor on how to use those dollars to support the production of housing for people with low, very low, and extremely low incomes. Board members are required to bring different experiences and expertise to the table, ranging from representing low-income tenant associations to representing the financial services industry. Mr. Todd currently represents the nonprofit housing production community and is now being proposed as one of 3 members with significant knowledge of an area related to the production, preservation, and rehabilitation of affordable housing for lower-income households. If reappointed, Mr. Todd's second term would end on January 14th, 2025. Based on his materials submitted for this roundtable, Mr. Todd is very familiar with the nonprofit and affordable housing landscape in the district. As a Ward 3 resident, Mr. Todd holds a bachelor's degree from Connecticut College and a law degree from George Washington University. Mr. Todd served as a member of the district's Interagency Council on Homelessness for over 15 years, served as an ANC commissioner for 4 years, and has worked on or served on the boards of several nonprofits over the years, including CNHED, DC Central Kitchen, and Catholic Charities. As the principal of a company that currently contracts with the district on permanent supportive housing, I'm interested in hearing from Mr. Todd today on how his experiences support the board's advising efforts, and I'd like to ensure that there are no conflicts of interest between his work and board duties. Next, we will transition to 2 DC HFA or Housing Finance Agency board nominations. The DC Housing Finance Agency was established in 1979. As an independent corporate agency, HFA's mission is to support the development, rehabilitation, and preservation of accessible rental and homeownership housing through programs like DC Open Doors, the Home Purchase Assistance Program, and various bond financing programs. DC HFA is governed by a board of directors whose role is to set rules and make sure HFA follows its mission. The board meets regularly to review and approve funding plans, create goals to meet the district's housing needs, and advise the agency's leaders. The board consists of 5 members appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council. By law, the board must have 2 members who have experience in mortgage lending and finance, 2 who have experience in home building, real estate, architecture, or planning, and 1 who represents community or consumer interests. Our first HFA measure for consideration today would reappoint Ms. Carrie Robinson as a board member with experience in finance. Ms. Robinson received her Bachelor of Business Administration in Finance from Howard University and her Master's of Business Administration from Northwestern University, where her studies centered on real estate, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Currently, Ms. Robinson serves as a founder and managing member of Bright Horizons Ventures, LLC, which focuses on residential, multifamily, and commercial and hospitality development. According to the materials submitted to this committee, Ms. Robinson has executed over $360 million in real estate asset transactions, managed projects for small and mid-sized developers, and raised private funding for institutional-grade investments. She currently serves as a member of the Prince George's County Community Foundation and as a member of the African American Real Estate Professionals of DC. If reappointed, Ms. Robinson would continue to serve on the board until June 28, 2026. The second HFA nomination for today and the third measure on today's agenda would reappoint Ms. Heather Wellington to the role of HFA board member with experience in home building, real estate, architecture, or planning. Ms. Wellington attended George Washington University, where she studied both finance and marketing, and she received her Master of Science in Real Estate Development from the University of Maryland, College Park. Ms. Wellington currently serves as the Senior Vice President of FD Stonewater, a development, investment, brokerage, and asset management firm. According to the materials submitted to this committee, she manages every aspect of the development process at FD Stonewater, from acquisition and finance analysis to design, permitting, construction, and marketing. She also oversees the scope, request for proposals, and contracting process for architects, engineers, contractors, and other consultants. Ms. Wellington currently serves as the president of the African American Real Estate Professionals and is a member of the Urban Land Institute until June 28, 2025. Our committee has sent standard written questions to the three nominees and have now received those responses. I look forward to hearing more from the nominees today. I think we have one public witness who I will call up now. If you would hit that button on the bottom of the microphone, perfect.
Good morning. Since I only have 3 minutes to speak and my issue dates back to 2021, I created an analogy to express my issue, but I've also provided you all with more of the narrative in that other chronicle. Imagine you go into a store to get a loaf of bread and you don't pay any attention because you don't think you'd be picking up or purchasing anything contaminated. You go home only to realize that the bread you selected had a small spore or two of mold on 2 to 3 slices. You return to the store in an attempt to 1, get another loaf of bread, and 2, to inform the store of the issue so they can investigate and correct it, only to be told that unless it was the entire loaf, then there was nothing they had to do and that it was not a big deal, as it was just a part of grocery shopping and you would be fine. You accept that explanation, hoping that in consuming this bread, you would be okay because you didn't see the mold on the other slices. Well, you do consume, and it makes you very ill. When you research the issue, you learn that even though you didn't see the mold on the other slices, that the mold roots can spread throughout the bread. You return to the store to advise them of this, and again, they advise you that it was not a major issue and was nothing they had to do. You continue to shop at that store on several different occasions. You continue to see bread containing mold on the slices, sometimes seeing half of loaves with them, among other issues. Again, you try to explain to the store manager that this is a horrible situation and you ask for them to really look into correcting that. In their effort to resolve or correct, all they did was cut the mold spores out of a few of the slices and put the bread back on the shelves for purchase. While you knew that you could go to an Amish market or somewhere of the sort to obtain bread that was fresher and of better quality, you also knew or felt like you shouldn't have to. You felt like you should be able to go to a Safeway, a Giant, hell, even a dollar store to obtain bread that was of equal value and quality. Although I use bread as an example, the mold was actually in my apartment. Imagine being told that you would have to have more than your height worth of mold present for them to pretty much be concerned. I am 5'4" and was told I have to have at least 10 feet or more of visible mold for them to get engaged, that I had to get it taken care of as it was of no concern to them. Imagine patronizing this store, paying them your money on a regular basis, and them telling you that your health is not an issue to them. Well, just know I am creating a sandwich with that bread every day.
Thank you for your testimony. With the bread, I was thinking through, sort of wondering where we were going and how I could help. No. Great analogy. I appreciate it. It also, but it ended up giving me some good perspective because, I'm thinking about bread and sort of you can't know everything that's inside 100, 1,000 packs of bread and I don't know the danger. My mom used to say, I told her a little bit of mold, she said, peel it off. But it is different when it's in your home. There is, I think, an obligation to take those things seriously because you are breathing that stuff in. It can affect your health. And the resident and the owner of the property need to know if mold is present and where it's present, even if it's not visible. So let us try to help here. If you want to share, um, yes. Is the property information in your longer testimony? Excellent. Okay. Um, let us look at that. Have you been in touch with the Office of the Tenant Advocate?
I've been in touch with pretty much every government agency possible, HUD, OTA, DOB, DCRA, DOE, like everybody. Every DCRA has come out a couple times and fined them. They've gotten NOIs.
Hmm.
But it doesn't matter. It's like they'll just pay that little money and tell me shut up and they keep going. So
Okay. Here's what I want to do as a follow-up. I want to look at the address to see if we've gotten other complaints about the address.
Yes,
Whether,
sir.
even if we haven't, it doesn't matter. If the issue is there, then it's important. I want to put you in touch with the Office of the Attorney General,
Yes, sir.
which has expanded their role in like consumer and tenant protection,
Okay.
to get some maybe legal direction from them, and then we will figure out what steps we need to take from there. But my team has read your testimony, your longer testimony already, because they're sending me notes about things that are, no, we appreciate it. So we will follow up with you in pretty short order, and we'll go from there to work through this. But I'm sorry to hear that you're living through this. This is an apartment?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know if other neighbors are having the same issue? Is it to your knowledge?
I can definitely assume the one that used to, well, it's been several people have lived above me since I've moved in 2018, because the last few in the narrative, there is water coming from 303 and through 203 into I'm in 103. So I know everybody who's lived above me
Yeah.
I have pictures of where their mold literally grew out of their ceiling.
Okay.
And she just moved. Like I'm probably the only one really complaining and really, raising feathers about the whole issue.
Yeah.
Everybody else is just saying, to hell with this, I'm gonna go.
Yeah, I'm glad you are raising this issue so that we understand what's going on and what we can or need to do to fix it. So I look forward to us being in touch with you, and we'll try to help you through it. We got
Thank
some
you.
resources in the city. We just got to get them to you to assist.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for being with us. And now I'm going to bring up our nominees, starting with Chapman Todd. All of our nominees are virtual today, so give us a second to get everyone queued up. And the three government witnesses should have a link to, you have to accept promotion. What I'm going to ask, I'm going to swear in all of our government witnesses together. And then we will go in this order, Chapman Todd, Carrie Robinson, and Heather Wellington. So all nominees with their cameras on. Excellent. And so we swear in all of our government witnesses and the Housing Committee. So I'll ask that you raise your right hand. You swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide to the Committee on Housing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Yes.
Chapman Todd, was that an affirmative from you? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. Was that a yes to the swearing in? Hey, Chapman Todd, can you
Yes.
hear me? There we go.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can now. Was that a yes at the end of the
Yes.
swearing in?
Yes, it
Excellent,
was.
excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks for being with us, and you can begin your testimony.
Sure. I do. I guess I just do want to confirm that you can still hear me.
Yep, we can hear you.
Hello?
Now we can. Oh,
Okay,
it
thank
is a
you.
little unstable.
Good morning, Chairperson White and members and staff of the Committee on Housing.
Mr. Todd, I hate to interrupt you. The connection is a bit unstable. Here's what I'll ask you to do for now. Could you turn off your camera and let's try it that way to see if that helps the audio connection?
Okay.
All right, here's what we'll do. I'm going to move to Carrie Robinson and Heather Wellington, and the committee team will touch base with you, Mr. Todd, to see if we can figure out the connection issue. Carrie Robinson, welcome. Thanks for being with us this morning. You can begin your testimony.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairperson White and members of the committee. I'm Carrie Robinson, and it is my pleasure to receive your consideration for my nomination to serve on the Board of Directors of the District of Columbia Housing Finance Agency. I'm grateful to Mayor Muriel Bowser for nominating me, and I am honored to have this opportunity to serve the residents of our district. Chairman White, I am also grateful and thankful for your championing of affordable housing as well. I want to spend the next several minutes discussing my continued interest in serving as a member of the HFA Board of Directors and qualifications to do so. My professional and academic background demonstrate a track record of technical capacity in the industry and a passion for housing accessibility. I earned my Bachelor's of Business Administration and Finance from Howard University, and after graduating from Howard, I joined the International Investment Bank, J.P. Morgan in New York City, where I helped individuals build wealth. After working several years in the investment banking industry, I was admitted to the Master's Business Administration degree program at the Kellogg School of Management, where I graduated with a focus on innovation, entrepreneurship, and real estate. After my graduate studies, I joined Marriott International, where I managed marketing and strategic partnerships with a focus on brands and experiences. After gaining experience at one of the world's largest hospitality companies, I sought to transition to entrepreneurship using real estate development as a mechanism towards that path. Using my experiences in real estate and finance as a backdrop, I established Bright Horizon Ventures, a real estate development company specializing in the development and acquisition of institutional quality, multifamily, and hospitality assets. Through the work we do at Bright Horizon Ventures, I have gained a deep understanding of the district's housing market and the needs of its residents. During this time, I have developed and executed over 40 million in real estate transactions, many using the various mechanisms available to developers to create and preserve affordable housing, including tax-exempt bonds, low-income housing tax credits, housing preservation funds, and housing production trust funds. I also understand the unique dynamics of developing housing in the district, having successfully completed 4 TOPA transactions where we have been able to preserve and increase affordable housing for district residents. As you already know, the District of Columbia Housing Finance Agency collaborates with for-profit and non-for-profit developers to provide affordable home financing throughout the city. As the board oversees the work of the agency to deploy this financing, it is crucial to have a holistic perspective. As a practitioner, I will bring a practical perspective that will help to facilitate the deployment of the agency's dollars in an efficient way to ultimately deliver on the mayor's goal of creating and preserving 36,000 units of housing, with 12,000 of them being affordable. While my professional and personal background make me a strong technical candidate for the DCHFA board, my passion for these issues will make me a dedicated board member. I am enthusiastic about helping to further the agency's mission of advancing the District of Columbia's housing priorities. I will use my skills and experience to help DCHFA have a broader and deeper impact on the lives of district residents. I'm not far removed from the people who are directly impacted by our work. As someone with family members who rely on district-financed housing, I personally have observed the life-changing effects that stable, affordable housing has on people and the communities in which they live. Looking forward, affordable housing faces many challenges in the district. The mayor's historic commitment to the district's Housing Production Trust Fund is a significant step in the right direction. It will be critical, however, that all the other pieces of the affordable housing toolkit are in place as well. As a member of the DCHFA board, I would work with my colleagues to advocate for additional strategies to increase affordable housing options. Additionally, I would work with my colleagues to lead an examination of the framework for awards to ensure the city's most creative, efficient, and forward-thinking developers have a chance to access these resources. I will also work with my colleagues to review the current home ownership programming and financing methods to ensure that pathways to home ownership are still conceivable in this high interest rate environment. I would also advocate for equitable representation among developers that work with the agency. These organizations should possess a level of diverse perspectives and experiences to effectively and intentionally develop housing with the district's diverse residents in mind. Moreover, they should be connected to diverse district-based professional services organizations and contractors to perpetuate economic prosperity created by real estate deals. I look forward to being a resource to the agency as it carries out its mission and the priorities of the mayor, the council, and other district stakeholders. I'm eager to work collaboratively with other members of DCHFA's board to continue to build on the momentum of their current areas of focus. Thank you again, Chairperson White, for the opportunity to testify before this committee. I would be happy to respond to questions from you and other members of the committee.
Thank you so much. Heather Wellington, welcome, and you can begin your testimony.
Good morning, Chairperson White and members of the committee. I'm Heather Wellington, and it's my pleasure to receive your consideration for my nomination and reappointment to serve on the Board of Directors of the District of Columbia Housing Finance Agency. I'm grateful to Mayor Muriel Bowser for nominating me for the reappointment, and I'm honored to have this opportunity to continue to serve the residents of our district. I'm a resident of Ward 5 in Washington, D.C. I'm an institutional commercial real estate professional and have worked in commercial real estate in the D.C. area for over 19 years. In my career as a commercial real estate developer, I've managed new construction, base building renovations, tenant improvements for more than 3 million square feet of space, totaling more than $900 million. I started my professional career here in DC at Combined Properties as a property manager, where I managed over 1.5 million square feet of retail space throughout the DC metropolitan area. I then moved on to the JBG companies, where I worked in development, managing all aspects of real estate development process for the company's large-scale office, hotel, multifamily, and mixed-use development projects. During my time at JBG, I managed the development of over 1,200 hotel keys, 500,000 square feet of trophy office project. I'm currently the Senior Vice President of Development at FD Stonewater, a real estate brokerage, development, investment, and advisory firm, where I manage all aspects of ground-up development projects, renovations for the firm nationally. My active projects currently at FD Stonewater include a GSA leased office renovation and a 9-acre mixed-use new construction public-private partnership between several private entities and local governments and the federal government. I was born in the Bronx, New York, and grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts before moving to DC to attend college at the George Washington University, where I received a Bachelor of Business Administration. I went on to earn a Master of Science in Real Estate Development from the Colvin Institute at the University of Maryland. I'm active in my community through community service involvement with my sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and in 2022, I was elected president of the African American Real Estate Professionals of DC, a DC-based organization dedicated to furthering opportunities for minorities in real estate. I'm eager to continue my service on the DC HFA board. Making homeownership attainable to all residents of DC remains a priority to me. I grew up in affordable rental housing with my mother and grandmother in New York City and Boston. I've lived in the DC metro area for over 20 years and have personally and professionally witnessed the rapidly changing environment that has caused the cost of housing to increase dramatically for DC residents. Through my personal experiences with affordable housing, I've witnessed firsthand the importance of creating long-term affordable housing for individuals and families. I've seen the life-changing impacts of affordable housing for individuals and communities. My personal background, coupled with my professional experience, have helped to sustain my commitment as a board member, overseeing the DCHFA and furthering its mission to advance DC's housing priorities by investing in affordable housing and neighborhood development across all wards. DCHFA works with for-profit and nonprofit developers to offer financing that supports the development of affordable housing in the district. In my professional career, I have direct experience working to acquire, finance, and develop deals, which has been beneficial in my time on the board. I will continue to bring my experience as someone who has sat on the other side of the table working in these areas and is serving to maintain and provide new affordable housing opportunities for district residents. My experience as a developer has and will continue to assist me in evaluating initiatives led by DCHFA to offer financing programs that further support development in DC. I played a key role in obtaining the conveyance of legal rights and approvals from governmental entities, including the plan unit development process for over 2 million square feet of mixed-use projects. By actively managing the entitlement process, I've become proficient in navigating zoning regulations and other permitting processes and developed an awareness of internal processes and organizational structures at various agencies, and will continue to bring this valuable knowledge to the board regarding moving projects forward efficiently and lawfully. The district is still rebounding from COVID-19 pandemic, which continues to impact our communities and our residents. As a member of the board, I have contributed to DCHFA's efforts to remain steady on its course to provide resources to developers and residents by investing in affordable housing and neighborhood development. I'm proud of what the agency has been able to achieve, and I'm eager to continue working with DCHFA as it explores new initiatives and processes that are further collaboration with other district agencies, and continue to work with Mayor Bowser, the council, our fellow housing partners, and developers to advance the housing priorities of the District of Columbia. Thank you, Chairperson White, for the opportunity to testify before the committee. This concludes my testimony, and I would be happy to respond to any questions from you and the members of the committee.
Thank you so much. And we now have Chapman Todd back. We'll try it again. Welcome, and you can begin your testimony.
Thank you for your flexibility with me this morning. And good morning, Chairperson White and the members of the committee and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. My name is Chapman Todd, and I'm honored to have been renominated to join the district's Housing Production Trust Fund Advisory Board and am grateful for the opportunity to discuss my qualifications for this board with you. I've lived and worked in the District of Columbia for more than 35 years. Almost all of my professional life has been working with and for social service agencies focused on providing services for individuals and families who have experienced homelessness. In the 1990s, I spent just under 10 years with DC Central Kitchen, helping to develop and grow this nationally renowned food service and job training program. In the 2000s, I spent 10 years working with Catholic Charities, where I was the division director for housing and shelter programs, and then as the director of housing development. In 2010, I started my own business, JDOT, to specialize in the development and operation of affordable housing projects in the DC area, with a particular emphasis on permanent supportive housing for extremely low individuals and families exiting homelessness. From my experience over the previous 20 years, I had seen that there were limited opportunities for people staying in shelters and living on the streets to move into safe and affordable permanent housing. In the past 10 years since I started JDOT, I've worked with a number of organizations to design, finance, and implement the operation of buildings, including a significant number of buildings with permanent supportive housing units. In the past 2 years, as a business, we've grown to include a permanent supportive housing case management team, where we provide ongoing services to just under 150 individuals and families under a contract with the Department of Human Services. In my professional work with both then Catholic Charities and now with JDOT, I've worked with a number of projects that have benefited from the financing provided through the district's Housing Production Trust Fund. This revolving loan fund has provided essential financial assistance to both nonprofit and for-profit developers in the ongoing efforts to preserve and produce affordable housing for district residents. Thanks to the ongoing support of the council and the mayor, resources available through the trust fund have led to the preservation and creation of hundreds of thousands of units of affordable housing and enabled developers to leverage hundreds of millions of dollars in other financing to make these projects available. I know how important the trust fund is to helping many people stay and thrive in the district while housing costs have continued to rise. And I know the district's trust fund is a nationally renowned model for other jurisdictions. As stated in the statute which established it, the purpose of the HPTF Advisory Board is to advise the district government on the development, financing, and operation of the trust fund and other matters related to the production of housing for low and moderate income households, and to review the uses of the trust fund for conformity with the statute. If confirmed to continue serving on the HPTF Advisory Board, my work with this advisory board will be informed by my experience in development and operation of affordable housing for the most vulnerable residents, particularly those at 30% AMI and below. I believe that the district has the opportunity to make significant strides towards ending homelessness for all district residents, and a strong and sustained trust fund, as well as continued and improved cross-departmental collaboration, is and will continue to be a crucial part of reaching this goal. I know how committed the past and present advisory board members and the district government staff have been towards making this board a constructive forum for innovative program ideas. And I believe moving forward that this can prove to be even more effective in developing resource and ideas for generating, creation, and operation of deeply affordable housing. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to continue to bring my experience and perspective to the work on this advisory board. That concludes my comments. I thank you for the opportunity to be before you today and your consideration of my renomination to this important board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will jump into questions, and I'll start with you, Mr. Todd. You're currently an inactive member of the Housing Production Trust Fund Board because your term expired in January of 2023. Is that right?
Yes, the term ended. I've still been participating in the meetings. There are 2 members with active terms right now,
Okay.
as far as I know. So there have been three of us participating. Again, my term ended at the other two, I believe, are current. The board can have up to 9 members.
And in your current role, you hold the position of a member who represented the nonprofit housing community. You spoke in your testimony about some of the extensive nonprofit background during, including your work with DC Central Kitchen and Catholic Charities. Can you give an example of how you shared your experiences from the nonprofit housing community with the DHCD as a board member?
Sure. In my perspective, coming into this board was it's been particularly focused on thinking about how the design and then ongoing operation of permanent supportive housing, which is my particular professional interest in deeply affordable housing, how the resources are aligned to support not only getting the buildings up and going with a significant number of units for people at 30% AMI and below, but also for the availability for service component and ongoing service engagement in the buildings. So, as an example, there's been, I believe, increased emphasis on both from DHCD and HFA, as an example, on the importance of resident services and space for resident services in buildings when they are both funded and then operational. So, and that's a spot where I think I bring a unique perspective, having worked as a service provider for so long, knowing how important it is to be present in buildings and to have space to work in buildings and to continue engagements with residents in buildings to ensure that they are able to keep up with their lease terms, to pay their rent, to be able to have support if they need job placement assistance or social service assistance. So that's one area where I think the perspective of having worked as a direct service professional has instructed how buildings get built and then how they're set up for ongoing operation success.
I appreciate that. I've seen some movement in that lane in the agency, which may be because of the perspective and experience you're bringing there, but that is a very important perspective. So I'm glad you have been vocalizing that. Now you're now being nominated for a different advisory board position and would be a person with significant knowledge of an area related to the production, preservation, and rehabilitation of affordable housing for lower income households. Do you see your role changing at all on the board as you go into your next term?
In terms of the category, I think my experience and expertise is informed on a couple different levels. So while I see myself primarily as a service provider and bringing that perspective, I do spend a significant amount of time working particularly with nonprofit groups on their engagement in the ownership in buildings that are funded through DHCD and others. So I do have a perspective of working with nonprofits and their particular role in how development projects are structured to have meaningful nonprofit engagement. And so, yes, while I am not a developer or a development professional per se, given my focus, I have learned and observed how nonprofits, in particular nonprofits that are primarily service providers but are also in the development or trying to be in the development world, can bring their perspective and be part of those engagement. So I see it's a little bit of a different side of my professional experience that I'm bringing, but I'm not going to voice anything differently than I've done in the previous years. It's just that I will maybe be able to reference my experience with working with nonprofit agencies as much as I have been doing as a service provider.
Okay, fair enough. You currently work as principal of the company JDOT, is that right?
Yes.
Great. And JDOT works in the affordable housing space, but is not a nonprofit itself. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Can you say more about your work at JDOT? Like, what do you do specifically?
So the business itself, which is now 10 employees, there's a service component, which is a contracted permanent supportive housing case management provider. So as we have clients who are assigned to us through the District Department of Human Services who are in permanent supportive housing. So we have a case management team that works with those individuals and families who are assigned into the DHS program, and we work with them on housing placement. And then once they are in permanent housing, then we work with them on an ongoing basis, multiple meetings per month, to ensure their housing stability. So that is the bulk of the work that JDOT does. We also do some resident services programming, which is directly with buildings where we are paid through the ownership entity to work in buildings to do case management to other individuals in the building, with other individuals in the buildings who will need any kind of social service assistance or need ongoing support with whatever they might need. So that is another smaller line of business where we're working in 4 buildings where we're doing that. And then a portion of the time that I spend is working with nonprofit agencies that are involved in the development process. So, you know, my clients right now, and as I listed in the question are here, so I've been working extensively with the Lisner Home staff there as they are working in developing the building on their campus in Ward 3. I work extensively with Housing Up, that is a group that is involved in a number of development deals and also a social service provider. So mostly, I'm the one that's doing that portion of the work, and the rest of the staff on our team is working on the permanent supportive housing provision with the DHS contract and the resident services inside the buildings.
Okay. As the part of the committee's oversight responsibility, we review housing production trust fund contracts that DHCD sends to the council to approve funding for new housing projects. So I'm going to ask a few questions about JDOT's connections to those contracts and any possible conflicts of interest with your position on the board. The committee has seen JDOT listed on several of the contracts as the supportive services provider. Does that mean that JDOT is involved in each of these projects where the company's name is listed as supportive services provider?
Well, it will be when projects are funded through DHCD or go through HFA development, our development team can identify a preferred social service provider that would be paid through the DHS permanent supportive housing contract. So on those ones, we would be the social service provider under the DHS contract in those projects. There are several where we are with the development team slated as the resident services provider or a provider of ongoing services that is not part of the DHS contract. So the answer to that would be yes. In those projects, we would be involved in an ongoing basis on the delivery of the permanent supportive housing services as well as the resident services.
Okay, so JDOT receives funding from Department of Human Services, but not from the Housing Production Trust Fund for these contracts. Is that right?
Yes. So it's an outside contract. The DHS contract is directly with JDOT, and so like the 150 or 135 or so individuals and families that we're serving under the DHS contract right now, that is directly, paid. It's actually largely Medicaid funding, and then DHS will pay what Medicaid won't on that contract. For buildings that are funded through the RFP or site-based permanent supportive housing, the clients, so say there's a project like example, the Lisner Home, where there will be 19 permanent supportive housing clients that are in the larger 93-unit building. In that project, DHS will pay for the ongoing services directly to the permanent supportive housing provider, and the plan there is for JDOT to be the social service provider under the DHS contract in that building, but not through DHCD.
So when there's a couple other contracts that we'll touch on, but when we first heard of JDOT's involvement in HPTF projects, the committee asked DHCD for information about the Housing Production Trust Fund Board's conflict of interest policy. DHCD confirmed that the board members must abide by DC's Code of Conduct and Ethics, which is pretty stringent. Otherwise, because the board is a policy advisory board that doesn't vote on funding allocations, there are not more stringent requirements. Do you believe that JDOT's contracts with DHS pose any ethical conflicts of interest for serving on the board?
I did not. And before I first joined the HPTF board, I had talked with the MOTA staff and then DHCD. With the HPTF board as an advisory board, the board doesn't see any projects like it does. The board doesn't vote, doesn't look at anyone's deal, actually doesn't even see, other than the list that's publicly shared after, like, which projects have been funded. The board, in my experience, and also as has been explained to me, and I think as is borne out by the statute, is an advisory group. And so for the purposes of the meetings at the HPTF advisory board, in my experience, they are the sharing of ideas on how the HPTF resources or funding mechanisms in the district can be better not necessarily better, but what are the best practices that would advise the larger community, not just DHCD, on how the resources could be maximized to benefit stretching the HPTF dollars as far as possible. And it's been, as I said in my testimony, I'm really very much focused on housing development and operation for individuals at 30% AMI and below, which has been a challenge. And there's a statutory requirement that is in the regulations for the HPTF, and that number has historically not been what has been the goal of 50% of the resources going to 30% AMI and housing units and below. And my interest has been, trying to work with ideas and concepts on how that could be better met and how the resources could be better targeted, if they could be, or how we as a community could think about to make sure that those goals were met for the individuals at the lowest end of the area median income.
So let me ask about one project that may help to sort of illuminate this a bit. The committee has received since January of 23, 14 HPTF contracts, including the Fort Totten Limited Partnership, which came to us in early 2023. I actually went to an ANC4B event and heard about a project that presenters called a joint venture between Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing and JDOT. When the committee received the contracts, though, for the project a few months later, JDOT was not mentioned in the package at all, not even as the service provider. DHCD confirmed that JDOT was the proposed social service provider, but was not part of the ownership structure and didn't receive any HPTF money. Do you know why JDOT wasn't listed by the time the contract came to the council?
I have no idea. On that project, APA had identified us as the preferred PSH service provider. So I don't know. I'm not sure with the HPTF contract. Again, I don't know what the HPTF contracts would say, whether those would necessarily reference a service provider or not. But that is a project that we've talked with APA about for a number of years. I mean, honestly, those are the type of projects that we are very interested in being involved in as a service provider, because the development team has thought about, how to accommodate for the space for a permanent supportive housing provider. APA has a very robust resident services programming all on their own that we're looking forward to engaging with and connecting with once that building is up and operational. So, I can't speak to where that, it's no partnership. JDOT's not in a ownership role of any projects. We're a social service provider and a resident services provider, and that's how we would be. In that project, we just would have been identified as a permanent supportive housing contractor with DHS.
So from your experience in your first term, would you recommend any changes to the board structure or authority?
So I've had I have had conversations. There's been, at this point, and I haven't been on this advisory board for very long, but there's been, a leadership change. I originally came in with Director Donaldson, and then Drew was the director for a while, and now it's Director Colleen Green. So there's been some staffing transitions that have made it, a little bit difficult to get a, direct direction with this advisory board on how to be most helpful, because it's, giving advice to leadership of the DHCD. What I would like to see, and what I've shared with DHCD, and honestly what would be meaningful for me, and I think other members, is to have this be a place for really the sharing of ideas and generating conversation, looking at best practices in other communities around the country, what other places have done, creative ways that they have addressed in terms of policy, particularly on the development and operation of the 30% AMI housing and below. There isn't really a place in my mind for that conversation, either inside an advisory board or outside in the advocacy community for that type of discussion. And I have felt like the HPTF advisory board can be the place for that. Again, it is not a decision making. It doesn't review anyone's projects. It doesn't sign off on projects. I mean, it is just a conversation and can generate ideas. That's what I would like to help be part of moving forward as the HPTF board gets back up to a fuller membership. Again, it's down to 2 members with current terms and me that's been participating, but it is up to 9. And I know that the DHCD under Director Green there now has looked at and has worked, I think, with your staff and with MOTA to identify people that might be interested with a diverse set of experiences that can make it that forum for like sharing best practices and moving the industry forward in the District of Columbia. I mean, the HPTF is a unique source of funding. It's the envy of other communities around the country, but we do have absolutely things as a community that we can learn on how to best target that to create and operate housing for the lowest income individuals. And I would like to see the advisory board be the place where those ideas are out there, discussed, put forward for the consideration, and able to have a thoughtful discussion. It's been difficult with the limited number of board members recently, as well as the changes, but I do think that there's an opportunity going forward to have it be that forum and really generate some great ideas and thinking, particularly in a resource constrained era that we are entering right now, on how to get the most out of the resources that are available.
I appreciate that. I think the board should have 9 members, and this is something I flagged in our budget hearing with the DHCD director, and it is something that is in our budget report. But I do think you're right. We need a full complement of board members in order for it to be its most productive. This is an important fund, which makes this an important board, and I like the idea of the board bringing in those outside perspectives to make sure we are always looking at our housing production and preservation work, including our spending, our goals, strategically and critically. So I appreciate that. Those are all the questions I have for you. I want to thank you for being with us and working through some tech challenges that does happen sometimes. So I appreciate you working with us to make sure we could get this done.
And I appreciate your patience with the tech challenges on my end. Thank you.
Absolutely. Now we will turn to Heather Wellington and Carrie Robinson. Thank you again both for being with us, and thank you for your testimonies. Let me start with a few questions for both of you. And so I'll start with Heather Wellington. You mentioned some of this in your testimony, but could you list your top one or two goals that you'd like the board to accomplish during your term?
Sure. So I'd like to, during my term, if reappointed, I'd like them to further establishing a mentorship program or ways to improve how we work with emerging developers. I think there's a large opportunity there in DC. We have a strong base. We have people that have been learning for each other. So any way that HFA can contribute to that, and that will allow us to provide more affordable housing and look at different resources that we can provide to the community. So I'd say that's one of them, and that is one of our programs. The McKinney Act program helps in that area, but also just the mentorship program and being established. And I think the second is, and this was touched on, but it's not me just repeating it. I started most of my career in DC, 12-ish years, and the last 7 I've been working nationally. And I think as the market has changed, we need to look at what other agencies are doing around the nation. So making sure we have the resources to research what other agencies or what other districts are doing to provide, as interest rates are never going to be as low. We have to look at how we're providing our HPAP, how we are working for our resources, and making sure we're still targeting low income affordable housing, but also housing for the missing middle, which I think that gap is going to continue to grow as interest rates, don't return low, and a lot of focus is on low income, which is very important, but also missing middle is important for middle income. That first home deposit is often very hard for individuals that can make the payments. So those would be 2 recommendations.
I appreciate that. And Carrie Robinson, what would you list as your top one or two goals that you'd like the board to accomplish during this term?
Sure. So one of them sort of continues on a theme that Heather mentioned in terms of the frameworks and the tools, the programs that we have for home ownership. The dynamics of the market have changed, and at the time, policy limits, loan sizing, application requirements are made based on the environment at the time. And I think that we've evolved in terms of interest rates, in terms of baseline pricing for housing assets in the district. And so it would be one of my goals to kind of take a critical, look at that and make sure that the frameworks that we have in place are appropriate and help us ultimately facilitate the home ownership yield that we're trying to create. And then the other thing would be to, on the LIHTC side and use of HBTF funds, right? In the, bond cap limited environment that we're in, how do we make sure the allocation of those resources are most efficient? Previous, sort of approaches or understandings of how to allocate those funds, again, could potentially use, right, like agencies coming together to create an understanding about, in this environment, what is the most efficient way to get the most housing yield for those resources.
I appreciate those. One thing I'll just flag, because this came up in my budget meeting with the director. A number of directors, agency directors, organization directors around the city will talk about Black home ownership as a priority. But when I start to probe what are we doing to specifically meet the goal of Black home ownership as opposed to home ownership more broadly, I usually don't get an answer, and that concerns me. So I guess one of the requests as you're looking at in your first goal, a critical look at home ownership yield, would ask that you as board members be thoughtful about whether there are things we need to do or do differently to make sure that part of that yield is specific to Black home ownership, since that is a stated goal for the city.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
So starting with you, Carrie Robinson, what has been your greatest accomplishment on the board so far?
So one caveat is that, my term just started last year. I came
That's right.
in the midterm. So I am humble and, careful, did use the past few months to, really learn before sort of, hopping out there and making suggestions and making recommendations. But in terms of, biggest accomplishment, I think that we have done a lot in terms of the deals that we've moved in the time that we have in the rising interest rate environment. I think we've all worked to be very deliberate and flexible on how we evaluate deals and ensuring that with the resources that we have to work with, that we've been able to move and utilize all of the bond cap that we had. It has been put to work into deals despite a challenging development environment and interest rate environment.
It is challenging. Thank you. And for Heather Wellington.
Yes, so I would say, one of I'm most proud of just the agency remaining on track. You see, other cities were crippled from COVID. We were able to continue bond issuance. Some really, I think I've, supported the issuance of over 40 development projects in my tenure on the agency thus far. Some very important ones such as Skyline, residences at Kenilworth. So being able to support the agency and remaining on track, closing issuances and not having to stop in this type of market, and also being able to look at how do we continue the issuance of bonds that the developments are going to go forward, stay on time, stay on project, because as our resources are limited and there's bond cap issues, the interest rates are up, we don't have the ability to have projects that are not well thought out. So continuing to ask questions that keep people focused and bringing my expertise on, I know this is happening with contractors. Have we looked at this? Or are we, creating data where we're seeing the average cost of housing, it's going up? What are we doing and what does that mean to our pipeline? So I'm just continue to be proud of my ability to bring my knowledge from just the general development arena into the agency to keep us moving forward.
I appreciate that. For most people watching this probably know, but just for the broader public, these are particularly challenging times, as both nominees suggested. Challenges, restrictions with our bond cap, proposed reduction in the Housing Production Trust Fund, and just the constant need for more housing that everyday people can afford. So I appreciate that. And both of you come with diverse backgrounds that I think help us look at projects and proposals more critically. Staying with you, Heather Wellington, how do you think the board can improve?
So I think by improving, we're a very collaborative board. We talk, we meet regularly with the agency at our board meetings, so we have the benefit of meeting with each other. And I think it's just continuing to push that. Now we've been working very well together. The agency has been doing very well, and now, as I don't want to keep going back to the market has changed, but how does the board improve? It's what do we need to do to continue to oversee the agency as we're making, so holding everyone accountable, not that we don't, but continuing to hold everybody accountable, putting goals and plans in place and checking in this post-COVID environment. So our improvements would just be to continue to check in with each other. How can we do better? And doing research as an agent, as a board, to bring that back to the agency, to be reactive and proactive.
And Carrie Robinson, thoughts on ways the board can improve?
Sure. So I think one of the really important and unique things is that we work closely with the HCD to administer. It is partly their work and partly ours in order for us to collectively deliver affordable housing. And so I think, one thing I want to continue to facilitate and see is close relation with the HCD and continued, creative thinking and solutions that are mutually beneficial, constant, communication about how we can further refine the programs that we have to be more effective in a challenging environment.
So specifically to the board's role of creating and expanding affordable housing opportunities for low and moderate income families, how do you think HFA can play a role in shaping the future of housing downtown? Let me start with Carrie Robinson.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned downtown specifically, just sort of thinking about that as some white space and an opportunity.
I appreciate that. Looking at I think, a historically changing economy that's leaving so many office buildings vacant and many leases not being renewed. We see a lot of focus now, which I think is a few years overdue, but a lot of focus on one, conversions, but other transitions. So whether it's demolition or however you build more housing downtown, I think the future does not include a need for as much office space, but it does include a need for more housing. So to the extent that you think we should be looking at housing downtown, do you see a role for HFA there?
I think I think that's an excellent idea. It's an example of some of the creative, thinking that we should be considering. And I think that, of course, with the research and technical expertise of staff and our, partner agencies, we can look at how we can incentivize or make developing downtown compelling. And so whether that is, how we score, whether it's, some additional resources that can be contributed based on where your project is located. I think these are all, potential pathways or methods to facilitating more housing or more projects in downtown.
And Heather Wellington, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, and that's a very important topic that I think everyone's looking at as, the market changes and the need for housing. It's no secret that building housing in areas that were previously office is expensive. But HFA should definitely have a seat at the table and maybe it's a round table in collaboration with sister agencies where everyone is looking at what is our part in this role? How do we make time and money are the things that, are kind of prohibitive sometimes in developing housing. So how do we make sure we're getting the developers that are interested in this through the process? Who does that fall under? Okay, that's me. And it's collaboration. It's looking at, costs are high to develop. So what can we do for pre-development loans? Are we sizing them appropriately? Are we getting them out the door so that if they need to do studies on an office building and, GPR scanning, are we allowing that under the pre-development loan terms? So those are areas where we can help developers as they're doing these studies to see what's feasible. And then working with our agencies to make sure, what are we requiring under these application requirements? Are we making the development cost prohibitive so that, it's going too high in the budget because we're requiring items that may not be necessary because the goal is housing, but we also want to balance that it's a healthy green requirements and getting the delivery. So I think it's collaboration, the ability to provide research and the resources to developers that are interested without being a bottleneck in this study.
I appreciate that. The resources are going to be key here. Let me move to a couple questions just for you, Heather Wellington. Your resume mentions that you are president of the African American Real Estate Professionals of DC. As president of that organization, what or just in any other sort of capacity or identification, what are you doing or what do we need to do as a city to promote diversity and inclusion in the real estate industry?
Yeah, so I have been president. This is my third term, and part of one of the main organization missions is creating economic parity for Black professionals in real estate. And so it's education, it's access, it's opportunity, it's taking away the barriers to entry to becoming a developer or architect or contractor, whatever it is that you choose to do. So one of the key areas is the RFPs that come out. They require a lot of money to come up with initial renderings. We've worked with the district to make sure these RFPs are targeted to the communities and the minority developers, but also we want to make sure that what they have to include to apply it's not requiring a lot of capital that the larger, predominant, white institutions that have been around for years can put, $1 million into responding to an RFP, providing elaborate drawings before you even know if you have the disposition agreement, the LOI in place. So understanding that there are, capable developers, there are capable commercial real estate professionals that just sometimes need an assistance to get to the table, but they have the knowledge, the capital is not always there. How can we provide lending, and how can we listen to, what's happening at the agencies where they're trying to get projects through? Because a delay in a project for a smaller developer that's usually a minority developer is a lot different for a delay in a project for the larger firms that tend to be majority white. So continuing to provide the resources, listening, I think communication goes a long way, roundtables, hearing what people have to say, that promotes inclusion, that promotes, everyone having a seat at the table and taking away those barriers to entry that have been communicated and continue to be communicated.
And that rich perspective, I assume you bring that to your analysis of the deals that come before the board. Is that right?
To the extent that I can, yes. I mean, some of this is already baked in the application. We're just making sure it's a well thought out project. But yes, we want to make sure that the teams are built out and they're looking at, how are they working together with other district commercial professionals and minority businesses and partnering together.
Are they? I mean, I understand your answer to, to the extent that you can. Some of this stuff is already kind of, baked by the time it gets to you. Are there opportunities for you and the board to offer downstream recommendations to make sure the things that you are getting, the things that the board is receiving, have taken these sort of, historic disparities into account?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, we have good relationships. Our sister agencies have always, said the door is open for communication. So I think the opportunities are to continue on that communication, look at how, scoring is happening, get feedback. And yeah, when they get to us, they're already baked, but continuing working and say, well, what's going into the scoring process? Are we making sure we're meeting that goals there? We can provide suggestions, but obviously, we can't turn any way. We're a conduit. Yes, the communication and collaboration is key for, the upfront. And so far, everyone's open to hearing and open to working together.
Excellent. And right now you are at FD Stonewater, and you said you're working on GSA projects. Is that right?
Correct. So I'm senior vice president of development at FD Stonewater. My main focus right now is GSA projects, federally leased projects to the federal government nationally.
Okay. Do you have a sense in that work of what the future of federal space in the district is, and how that might affect the district's own future planning? So are you seeing sort of a reduction in federal leasing or anything else that would give some insights into what we need to be thinking about our own planning?
That's a loaded question. That's the $1 million question everyone wants to know. The federal government, there are two arms that I see. There's the mission-driven arms of the federal government where they need to be in the office, where they need to constantly do the lab and be there to do their work. We do mission-driven work, but there's also the federal government owns a lot of its space, and it's gonna if it needs to backfill, it's going to do that with other government agencies. So I think as the district, we want to make sure that we have an environment that's conducive to people wanting to return to work, and continuing to promote that. We have a great district. We have amenities. We have walkable areas. We have retail. So supporting that retail to make sure it's thriving, supporting people wanting to, come out for a lunch break or go do something after work that's easy to get to, supporting access into the district, making sure our transportation and our roads, these are all factors that bring people into the office and want to stay, because we know the federal government is one of the largest tenants. They're going to remain. They're holding on to their property. They're not selling as much as people thought, and that could always change. We have an election in November. Administration policies change. But in the event that they continue to backfill their spaces with their other tenants, we want to make sure we as a district, for the outside built environment that we have control over, are making these places where everyone wants to work, live, and play.
And then finally, Has your work at FD Stonewater posed a conflict regarding any deals that have come before the board?
No, we do not operate in the affordable housing space.
Excellent. And Terry Robinson, your resume also notes that you are part of the African American Real Estate Professionals of DC. What role do you have in that organization?
I'm just a member.
Okay. And in your time running Bright Horizon Ventures LLC, you've done a lot of work in Columbia Heights and Brightwood in particular through that company. Is that right?
That's right.
What are some of the barriers you saw to your work in those neighborhoods?
Sure. So I think that the 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 dynamic of the district and managing work with tenants, um, it requires an additional level of sort of skill and nuance as you think about how to redevelop or improve or substantially improve existing assets, which was the case in both of those projects. And so there are significant protections for tenants, which I think are necessary and critical. However, sometimes those same protections can make it challenging for an investor who is trying to embark on a project in a limited resource environment to do those things efficiently and in a manner that ultimately will create an opportunity for affordable housing to become available to even more district residents. So I think there are some, opportunities to create more support, more bridging rather, between developers and the agencies that help tenants understand what their rights are and some empowerment by district agencies, when it's discerned that what the developer is trying to do is really going to add to affordable housing stock as opposed to limit or change it.
It is a tough balance. Somewhat on that point, you've also done work on developments in Maryland. What are the biggest differences you see between working in Maryland versus working in DC?
Mhm. Um, the the district has a lot of resources, and I think that what resources that the district has are really historic and sort of the envy of other jurisdictions. However, I think that as it relates to the same sort of issue around, tenant dynamic, I think has sort of evolved to make it challenging sometimes in the district, whereas there are, other sort of methods and pathways towards ensuring you have financially feasible, projects in other jurisdictions where the dynamic is a little bit more balanced.
Um, Anything specific you can say on that balance?
It is an extensive, I think, conversation that needs to be had. I don't know that we could cover it in this testimony, but I think just an anecdotal, sort of example is that um, if sponsors or owners aren't able to collect, we can't necessarily invest in the buildings and in CapEx in the way that we need to, right, to deliver high quality housing. And so further, if you can't collect and you don't have financially, performing buildings, it makes it challenging to go out and create more housing and do more projects. So, it is a complex problem. And I think it's, it's a conversation that I think became even more extreme after COVID, right? Like COVID definitely changed the dynamics of real estate and created a lot of challenges for everyday people around their, financial capacity. So I think it's a conversation, it's a longer conversation and one that I think is really important to ensuring that, both sides of the equation have affordable housing going forward.
Um, my final question, has your work at Bright Horizons Ventures posed a conflict regarding any deals that came before the board?
So the answer, well, we are acutely aware and I personally respect both real and perceived, conflicts of interest. We are practitioners. We have, the board has had to vote on deals where the sponsor, it may be, a client or someone that we have worked with before. And myself, I'm careful to always abstain from any deals where I'm, aware or in any way involved or could be perceived to be involved. But being a practitioner and being an actual, sponsor or developer, I think is critical on the board. It's really important that the people doing the work are helping to facilitate and move, transactions forward because we have firsthand experience. So, there are times where there is a conflict. We have, significant training and understanding about what is appropriate and what isn't. But I think ultimately, it's a positive thing to have practitioners on the board.
I agree because this is, as it was discussed, I think, in the first question with you two, this is a complex field, and we've got to do a lot with not a ton of financial resources when compared to the costs of producing affordable housing. So those are all the questions I have. I do really want to thank you, Carrie Robinson and Heather Wellington and Todd Chapman for being with us today, for your willingness to serve the city. I'm sorry, Chapman, Todd, I'm sorry about that. Your willingness to serve the city. It does require a lot of people who are already busy to kind of step up and be more busy for the good of the city. So I appreciate that, and I don't take it for granted. I want to thank our public witness for coming as well. One thing I'll note for the broader public is that public testimony is encouraged and or written testimony rather is encouraged and will be made part of the official record. Anyone who's interested may submit testimony by the close of business on Tuesday, May 28th to our new hearing management system, lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings. So LIM as in Michael S.dccouncil.gov/hearings. I also encourage today's nominees and the public to review our committee's budget report that we unanimously passed earlier this month. The report has policy recommendations for all agencies under our purview, including the agencies that the nominees today would advise if reappointed. The report can be found at dccouncilbudget.com, or please ask our team and we can send you the link. If anyone is interested in learning more about the work of this committee, please sign up at robertwhiteatlarge.com so we can be in touch with updates. With that, the business before this committee is concluded. The time is now 11:26 a.m. and this public roundtable of the committee is adjourned. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.